Rob Christensen has a special job in the District 22. He's our Vice President of Marketing. He's also the past president of this club, and he was an Area A1 governor. So Rob Christensen's speech is out of the entertaining manual, one of the advanced ones, number 2, and the title is Ace Your Conclusion. So Robert Christensen.
It's a beautiful day outside, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nice decent amount of cloud cover, not too warm. What about that local sports team? How are they doing today? Daryl, that was a really great introduction you gave, and I'm just so happy to be here in front of everybody to give this speech. What do those 3 opening lines have in common?
Positive.
Say again?
Positive.
Positive.
Or questions.
Questions. They're kind of weak, they're irrelevant, and they're time wasters, as well as being positive and questionable.
Huh.
They basically do nothing to help my speech, and they don't really engage the audience too much. Everybody been outside, right? So you knew what the weather was like before I mentioned it. I didn't even say what the local sports team was. And of course, Daryl did a good introduction. At some point during the speech, I can mention that, but to open with it is a bit weak. When does the audience listen to you most when you're up in front of the room?
Start.
At your conclusion.
At the opening, at the conclusion? Any other guesses or answers? Or necessarily guesses? The 2 times from my research are the opening and the conclusion. That's when you have the audience's greatest attention. Because off the bat, they're wanting to see if you're worth their time. And then normally when they can tell you're about to finish, oh, he's almost done. Maybe something important's coming. Those are those 2 times. And from the research that I've done, a lot of professional speakers will tell you the best way to handle your opening is with your second best material and conclude with your strongest. So tonight, I'm going to talk about, and you're going to learn, 2 common mistakes people tend to make in their conclusions, and also 3 keys to closing with power. Whether you're speaking to a Toastmaster audience, a bigger group, or even just one person. So let's start with mistakes. Question and answer period. How many of you given a speech where you concluded with a question and answer period? Professional speaker Craig Valentine gives an example, a story that he gave early in his career, where he gave a speech to a group on motivational techniques. And he closed his speech with a question and answer period. The final question about his motivational techniques came from a person who apparently owned and bred horses, who asked him, do these techniques work with horses as well as humans? How did that end his presentation? He had to give an answer on a subject he was not prepared to talk about, motivating horses. Anybody in the room ready to talk about that? You pretty much have to have a niche for that, don't you? So he had to give that answer, and that answer was something along the lines of, today's presentation was on motivating people. I can't really tell you from my experience. When everybody left the room, what's the last thing they remember hearing?
Horses.
Was that about motivating horses versus people, or it really wasn't his final thought that they heard? And so what he learned from that is to set limits. Take a look at that clock, and when you have just a couple of minutes left and you want to have Q&A, make sure that when you finish your Q&A, you're going to have time to give your conclusion. So let's say I'm doing a 45-minute presentation, and I'm down to the last 10 minutes. I could think, well, about 30 seconds to ask a question, a minute to answer it. I can handle 5 questions in about 7 or 8 minutes. That'll give me 2 minutes to conclude. So I'll tell everybody, I can take 4 or 5 questions, and then I'll give my conclusion. And then as I take those questions, I look at that 3rd question, 4th question. If it gets too close to time, then I stop taking questions. I say, if you have any further questions, you can catch me after the event. I'll be in the back of the room selling my CDs, which happens for professional speakers. If you're not selling, you just say, I'll be available afterwards. And then you cut it off and give your conclusion. The second mistake is when you give a really good speech, let's say you have 3 great main points. Let's talk about mutual funds. And I talk about the history of mutual funds and where they've been recently and how we're really poised to take advantage of the coming recovery. Oh, the red light, thank you. And I don't really conclude my speech. I just say thank you and walk off. Toastmasters tells us don't thank the audience. But sometimes you hear the wrong reason. It's not because you shouldn't thank the audience, it's because you shouldn't finish your speech with the two words, thank you. You want to finish with your conclusion, just like I gave the example of the question and answer period. If you want to thank your audience, say your audience bought you dinner to come speak. Prior to that point that you're going to conclude, you want to give that thanks. Thank you guys for having me today. It was a really great dinner. I appreciate speaking to your Rotary Club. Boom, then go into your actual conclusion. That's when you want to use that. So those two mistakes are ones that are the most common. And I left a little hole for you because I said just go to the conclusion, but I didn't tell you how to do that yet, right? So let's talk about the 3 ways that you can close with power. First, a quote. Who said, give me liberty or give me death?
Patrick Henry.
Magic.
Patrick Henry. What does that have to do with my speech? It's okay to say nothing. The answer is nothing. Now, I could have meant, well, maybe I only want to give speeches if I'm free to give speeches. Would you have got that on your own? Probably not. Make sure your quotes apply to your speech. Some people like people so much. Like I like Stephen Covey. I always like to try and fit a Covey quote into things. But if it doesn't fit, don't use it. Don't use those quotes. But if you have a quote that does apply, by all means, it can be very strong. Second technique is let your audience speak. Another professional speaker and past world champ, Ed Tate, actually won the world championship by letting his audience finish his speech. During his speech, he had the subject of, it's just one of those days. And he did the gesture towards the audience, and they said, it's just one of those days. And he did that 3 or 4 times throughout the speech, and as he gave his conclusion, the last thing he did was, and they all said it, the whole 1,500 people said, it's just one of those days. And he walked off the stage and won the world championship. Now that's a tough technique to do. I tried it myself at a district training event. Do you remember the problem I had is that I made it a little bit too complicated. It didn't really go as well. I had 2 topics and I did one with this hand, one with the other. I think if I'd have said this one myself and then went to this one and had everybody say it, it probably would have worked well, so I learned that myself. If you work on that though, it can be a really powerful technique and help people remember what that point is that you're having them say. Last technique is very important, and I alluded to it a little bit earlier with the walk-off on the thank you, and that is the call to action. So I want everybody to grab their pens, take your agenda and turn it over. I want you to write down this website, this is one word, talktothehuman.com. Talktothehuman.com. Now, just see how everybody responded by taking notes? If I were here as a professional speaker looking to make money, that's my website, and I would be trying to direct you to that site to look at more information. By getting everyone to take an activity and write it down themselves, I put it in your mind, oh, this is something that I may want to do later. I've actually written it down, I won't forget that it's there, because you wrote it down yourself. In a larger audience, I may only get half the audience or less to actually do that. They may turn over and say, I'm not writing that down. But if you get even some people to do that, they're going to take that next step, that call to action, and go to that website. Without the call to action, you're telling everybody just to live on, get set. And you know what I mean by that? On your mark, get set, don't go. If I just give you some information, don't tell you what to do with it, you're just on get set. So by telling you what action to take next, I'm giving you the opportunity to go, if you so choose. Putting together a powerful speech is possible for anybody if you use the right tools. I talked about Craig Valentine a little earlier, another quote from him. He likes to say, change small and change often. Don't try to make all the changes at once. Look at one thing, see how you can improve it, and then work on the next one. These tools are just some of the tools you can use to help improve your speaking and to improve your conclusions for your speeches. If you work on integrating these ideas in your speaking on a regular basis, you make small adjustments. Like have your conclusion after the question and answer next time, for instance. You can build on your skills, and you can ace that next speech and ace that conclusion.
Thanks, Rob. A nice conclusion to your speech, and I'm sure our next speaker will have everyone tuned in to his conclusion. Our next speaker is another past president of our club, Chuck Masters. He was also is a Spirit artificial intelligence